Good morning, readers, and welcome back to our final day of Life Isn't Fair in Quarantine Literacy. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that theme, life isn't fair. You hear a lot of adults saying that, right? Like, well, hey, life isn't fair. What'd you expect? And you hear a lot of kids saying it. You've probably said it yourself. Like, that's not fair. That's not fair. And there's something I tell my students a lot, which is that fairness doesn't mean that everyone gets the same thing. It means that everyone gets what they need. So I just want you to keep that in mind as you're thinking about what's fair. This week we read A Bear in My Chair, which sort of highlighted that, sometimes people act in ways that don't feel very fair or kind, and we have to get creative about problem solving. And then we read Ice Cream, where Frog and Toad were eating their ice cream and it all melted, and things did not go the way that that Toad wanted things to go. And sometimes we have to just move on and start over when things don't go our way. Then we read Peter's Chair, and we talked about how generosity can often quiet grief or sadness, right? When we're grieving something that we've lost, being grateful and generous can help with that. And yesterday we read We're All Wonders, one of my favorites. And that book is really about how unfair it is that people don't perceive us the way that we want to be perceived. And people don't perceive us the way that we feel on the inside. And sometimes how we look on the outside can have a bigger impact on people's perception of us than we would like. And that's not really fair, right? So today we're going to read one of my very favorite books, and it's called Those Shoes by Maribeth Boltz, and it's illustrated by Noah Z. Jones. This book I've had for a very long time. I read it many times when I taught first grade, and I also got it for my daughter, which is why her name is up there in the corner. And every time I read this book, I'm reminded of a connection to myself. I'm reminded of a time when I was about your age. And when I grew up, I had one pair of shoes that I owned. And I was wearing my one pair of shoes. And I think I told you about how I used to walk down to the end of my road to catch the bus. And it was such a long walk. Well, one winter day, it had been snowing and it was very cold. And I was wearing my shoes walking to the bus. And I came upon a giant puddle, and it was completely frozen over, or so I thought. And I stepped onto the beautiful ice at the top of the puddle, and I stood for one glorious moment thinking, I'm floating, I'm walking on water. And then crash, the ice broke. And I fell it was a deep puddle. My shoes were soaked, and of course it was freezing. And I knew I couldn't go to school in these shoes. So I ran home, knowing that I didn't have another pair of shoes. So my mom gave me her shoes. And of course they were giant, and they were also, not cool, not something I wanted the other kids to see. But it was my only option if I was going to go to school that day. So I put my mom's shoes on, and I ran back to the end of my road, and I caught the bus to school. And it was really embarrassing wearing those shoes all day. And I remember that feeling because it really stuck with me. And I was embarrassed with my shoes anyways, but then wearing shoes that looked like clown shoes was particularly embarrassing as a young child. And now I look back and think, hey man, that helped me to become who I am, helped me to develop grit and to realize that, gosh, kids sure can be mean, but who cares if they don't like my shoes? I'm a cool person, and I got a lot to offer, even if I don't have, the coolest shoes. Anyhow, I think about that story every time I read this book. We will get started now. Without further ado, Those Shoes. This is a big billboard saying, buy these shoes. I have dreams about those shoes, black high tops, 2 white stripes. Grandma. I want them. There's no room for want round here, just need, Grandma says. And what you need are a new pair of boots for winter. So there is a difference between want and need, right? And I remember when I was a kid being like, I want that, I want that, I want that. And I heard a lot from my mom. She would always say like, yeah, you may want it, but you don't need it. And we're just getting what we need right now. And we were lucky if we had that. Brandon T comes to school in those shoes. He says he's the fastest runner now, not me. I was always the fastest before those shoes came along. Nate comes to school in those shoes. Antonio and I count how many times Nate goes to the bathroom. 7 times in one day. Just so he can walk up and down the hall real slow. Next, Alan, Jacoby, and Terrence each get a pair. So slowly but surely, everyone around him is getting those shoes that he wants. Then one day, in the middle of kickball, one of my shoes comes apart. Looks like you could use a new pair, Jeremy, Mr. Alfrey, the guidance counselor, says. He brings out a box of shoes and other stuff he has for kids who need things. He helps me find the only shoes that are my size, Velcro, like the ones my little cousin Marshall wears. They have an animal on them from a cartoon I don't think any kid ever watched. There's those shoes. So he's feeling like, these are not for me. These are little kid shoes. I need those cool shoes, the black high tops with the 2 white stripes that all my friends have. When I come back to the classroom, Alan Jacoby takes one look at my Mr. Alfrey shoes and laughs. And so do Terrence, Brandon T, and everyone else. The only kid not laughing is Antonio Parker. I wonder why Antonio's not laughing. At home, Grandma says, "How kind of Mr. Alfrey." I nod and turn my back. I'm not going to cry about any dumb shoes. But when I'm writing my spelling words later, every word looks like the word shoes, and my grip is so tight on my pencil, I think it might burst. On Saturday, Grandma says, "Let's check out those shoes you're wanting so much. I got a little bit of money set aside. Might be enough. You never know." At the shoe store, Grandma turns those shoes over so she can check the price. When she sees it, she sits down heavy. "Maybe they wrote it down wrong?" I say. Grandma shakes her head. So the shoes are really expensive, you guys, and they don't really have the money to afford those shoes. Then I remember the thrift shops. What if there's a rich kid who outgrew his or got 2 pairs for Christmas and had to give one of them away? We ride the bus to the first thrift shop. Black cowboy boots, pink slippers, sandals, high heels, every kind of shoes except the ones I want. We ride the bus to the second thrift shop. Not a pair of those shoes in sight. Around the corner is the third thrift shop. I see something in the window. Oh, do you think he sees the shoes, you guys? Shoes. Black shoes. 2 white stripes. High tops. Perfect shape. $2.50. Those shoes. My heart is pounding hard as I take off my shoes and hitch up my baggy socks. "How exciting," Grandma says. "What size are they?" I shove my foot into the first shoe, curling my toes to get my heel in. "I don't know, but I think they fit." Grandma kneels on the floor and feels for my toes at the end of the shoe. "Oh, Jeremy," she says, "I can't spend good money on shoes that don't fit." I pull the other shoe on and try to walk around. "They're okay," I say, holding my breath and praying that my toes will fall off right then and there. But my toes don't fall off. I buy them anyway with my own money, and I squeeze them on and limp to the bus stop. So he wants these shoes so badly, you guys. He doesn't care that they don't fit. He doesn't care that his grandma won't buy them for them and he has to spend his own money. He's like, it is worth it because I just want to be like everybody else and I want to be cool. And I can really relate to that feeling. Can you relate to that feeling? At home a few days later, Grandma puts a new pair of snow boots in my closet and doesn't say a word about my 2 big feet shuffling around in my 2 small shoes. Sometimes shoes stretch, I say. Grandma gives me a hug. I check every day, but those shoes don't stretch. I have to wear my Mr. Alfrey shoes to school instead. One day during math, I glance at Antonio's shoes. Remember, Antonio was the one boy who didn't laugh at him when he came in with his Mr. Alfrey shoes. One of them is taped up, and his feet look smaller than mine. After school, I head to the park to think. Antonio is there, the only kid who didn't laugh at my Mr. Alfrey shoes. Yeah, why do you think now you have a little more information? I'm thinking maybe he didn't laugh because he's kind of in the same situation, right? He can't really afford those shoes either, and he wasn't about to laugh. We shoot baskets. A loose piece of tape on Antonio's shoes smacks the concrete every time he jumps. I think, I'm not gonna do it. We leap off the swings. I'm not gonna do it. We race from one end of the playground to the other. I'm not gonna do it, I say. Do what? Antonio says, breathing hard. What's he not going to do, you guys? What do you think? Does it have to do with the shoes and Antonio? Make a prediction now, what you think he's not going to do. Grandma calls me for supper and invites Antonio over too. After supper, he spies my shoes. How come you don't wear them? Antonio asks. I shrug. My hands are sweaty. I can feel him wishing those shoes were his. That night, I am awake for a long time thinking about Antonio. When morning comes, I try on my shoes one last time. What does that mean, you guys? One last time? What's he going to do with the shoes? Before I can change my mind, the shoes are in my coat. Snow is beginning to fall as I run across the street to Antonio's apartment. I put the shoes in front of his door, push the doorbell, and run. There he is. He's left the shoes on the top of the stoop, and he's running away. At school, Antonio is smiling big in his brand new shoes. I feel happy when I look at his face and mad when I look at my Mr. Alfrey shoes. So he's feeling really good about what he did, you guys. If you predicted that he was going to give his shoes to Antonio, you were right. And he's feeling so good about that generous act. But he's also feeling really sad for himself. That makes sense. But later, when it's time for recess, something happens. Everywhere there is snow. Leave your shoes in the hall and change into your boots, the teacher announces. Leave your shoes in the hall. It's then I remember what I have in my backpack. New boots. New black boots that no kid had ever worn before. Standing in line to go to recess, Antonio leans forward and says, "Thanks." I smile and give him a nudge. Let's race. There we go. What a beautiful act of kindness that he has done for Antonio. That is such an incredible thing. You remember when I said that sometimes your own grief can be quieted with an act of generosity and with gratitude. And I think that's exactly what this book is about. That even when times are rough, even if your circumstances are hard, if you can reach out and help someone, it's a beautiful thing to be able to do. If you can and when you can. And on that note, we will end our Life is Unfair week, because life can be really unfair. But just remember that as long as we see with kindness and act as generously as we can, we will move through this world in a beautiful way, giving everyone what they need and hoping that everyone gets exactly what they need and what they want. All right, my friends, I will see you this weekend, And I'll see you next week for our new theme. I can't wait. Bye.